Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing well. Day before yesterday I provided you with some material on sampling and the different types of sampling. I believe it's a little difficult to understand when you go through the material for the first time without any help. So I'm trying to make this small video wherein I'll just be going through the key concepts, and after listening to the video then you can go and read the material. It'll be easier for you to understand. And just a little disclaimer that I've never done this before, so it's the first time. It might not be that professional in the way, but I hope just it serves the purpose that you understand the topic. And I'll try and make it into 2 parts or 3 parts. In the first part I'll explain what is sampling and what are the different key terms or concepts related to it, and in the second one I'll talk about different types of probability sampling, and in the third possibly I'll talk about the different types of non-probability sampling techniques. So let's get started. First let's go through what is sampling. Let me just read out the definition for you first. Sampling is the statistical process of selecting a subset called a sample of a population of interest for purposes of making observations and statistical inferences about that population. Social science research is generally about inferring patterns of behavior within specific populations. Don't get boggled down by the complexity of it. Let's break it down for you to understand. Now, I said sampling is a statistical process of selecting a subset called sample. The first thing here is to understand what is a sample, and how do we why do we select it from a population. What is a population? Now let me give you an example. For example, there are some guests at home and you're preparing tea for them. Now before serving it to the guest, you just want to check if all the ingredients in the tea are in the appropriate quantity. Chini zyada nahi hai, patti kam nahi hai, and it's palatable. So what you do is, you can't drink the whole tea to just taste it, right? Then there'll be nothing to serve. So what you do is you take a spoon of tea out of the pan, taste it to check if all the ingredients are in the right quantity. So the spoon that you take out of the entire pan is your sample, because it's representing the quantity of the ingredients in the whole pan of chai. The whole pan of chai is your population, and that one spoon that you take out of it, which represents the whole chai, is your sample. Now to give you another example, and I think I'd given this example earlier as well in the class, that suppose doctor wants to see if you have some sort of an infection in your blood. So he asks you to go for a blood test. Now when you go for the blood test, in order to check if you have some infection, they're not going to squeeze out the entire blood from your body. What they do is they take some 5 to 10 mLs of blood, right? So that 5 to 10 mLs of blood is enough for them to tell if the whole blood in your body has some infection. So that 5 to 10 ml of blood is representative of what exactly is happening in the whole bloodstream. So that 5 to 10 ml of blood is your sample, and the whole bloodstream is your population. So we've understood what is population and what is a sample. And what is sampling? The process of choosing the sample is called sampling. Now you say, why do we do sampling, right? So we cannot study the entire population because of various reasons: feasibility constraints, cost constraints. So what we do is we select a representative sample. Now you say, so we say that sampling involves the selection of a few items from a particular group to be studied with a view to obtaining relevant data, which helps in drawing conclusions regarding the entire group. Now within the population also, there are 2 key terms that I want you to understand. One is called target population, and the other is one called accessible population. Now for example, if you want to do a study on healthcare workers who in India, or say in the state of in the city of Delhi, who are dealing with coronavirus patients, right? So this is your population. Now, these are all the healthcare workers working in government hospitals or private hospitals or whatever. You've not put on any selection criteria per se. So this is your overall population. Now you say that you set a selection criteria and you say that I want to study or I want to speak to the healthcare professionals who are in a position to talk about how they are dealing with the coronavirus patients. So you have set a criteria here. Now in that case, you are saying that these healthcare professionals should have the ability to share their experiences and their thoughts. So you are refining the general population, and from within the general population you're taking out a target population with the help of a set criteria, right? So that becomes your target population. The healthcare professionals who are in the position to share their experiences and thoughts, they are your target population. Now we come to the accessible population. Now what is the accessible population? The accessible population is composed of members of target population who are willing to participate and will be available at the time of data collection. Now there may be many healthcare professionals in Delhi who must have been working with the coronavirus patients, but not everyone would be willing to speak to you, and not everyone might be available to speak to you at the time of your data collection. So your accessible population is which is willing to speak to you and which is willing to provide you with the data. So if you have to understand it in terms of concentric circles, then the outside circle is your general population. Within that there is one circle which is your target population, and within the target population there is even a smaller circle which is your accessible population. I hope I've made the concepts clear to you. This another thing that we need to understand here is that what is the purpose of doing sampling. So there are two purposes of doing sampling. One is hypothesis testing. You test the hypothesis. For example, you have a hypothesis which states that about 60% of households in Rewari districts have TV sets. Now the researcher will select a sample of households and then calculate the proportion of households possessing TV sets in the district of Rewari. The problem now is to assess whether the sample result is such as to reject the hypothesis or whether it supports the hypothesis. So one purpose of sampling is to test the hypothesis. Second purpose of sampling is to estimate the parameters. Like the major objective of sampling is to estimate certain population parameters. For example, you want to study the proportion of clerks in an office working overtime. Now the researcher attempts to select a sample and calculate the relevant statistics. That is, you try to see the average or the proportion. So another important purpose of hypothesis is estimate of parameters and hypothesis testing. I hope you've understood so far. I'll make another video in which I'll talk about probability sampling and non-probability sampling. I'm breaking it into parts because editing it and clubbing it together in order to get through to you will be very difficult for me considering the time constraints. So I'm just making a shorter video in parts, right? Thank you.